Hello guys, it is me again, it's Horror Fan 34, and welcome back to another video, and welcome to day 10 of my 31 Days of Horror Challenge in October. Now that we are on day 10, I figured now it's time to review a slasher movie. And I figured I'd talk about this one. I feel like it would make the most sense for me to talk about this one, because I couldn't go through the month of Halloween without, or the month of October, I guess you should say, for talk about the slasher film like this one. Because when I think of 80s slasher movies, this is always like one of the top ones I always think of. It's right up there with the Friday the 13th movies and the Elm Street films, and like My Bloody Valentine, many more from the 80s that I love. And I had to talk about this one. And I actually talked about this film before on a couple of like the Thrill Me Thursdays channel. I think I mentioned it maybe in like one of them, but Sleepaway Camp. Figured I had to talk about Sleepaway Camp for the month of October. Just had to. I think I mentioned this movie when I did top 5 favorite twist endings in a horror movie. That was one of the Thrill Me Thursday challenges I did. And I mean, what more can you say about Sleepaway Camp that hasn't been said before? It's just written and directed by Robert Hiltzik. Basically, it's the whole idea. Camp Arawak, Martha. Basically, you have Angela played by Felissa Rose, who gets sent to live with her aunt and her cousin, her Aunt Martha and cousin Ricky. And then during the summer, Martha decides to send them both to camp. And then when they get there, there's a bunch of accidents and a couple murders that happen. It's kind of been a big mystery of who's the killer and things like that. And on top of that, too, you also have a pretty cool cast of people. Mike Kellen, I believe this was the last role he did before he passed away. He was in Just Before Dawn. You also like Jonathan Tiersten, Felissa Rose, of course. Christopher Collette, if you remember the guy, Christopher Collette's in this. If you remember the Langoliers, who anybody remembers the Langoliers, Christopher Collette played the guy who was like the violin student kid. He had like the glasses on and things like that. Albert, that was the character from the Langoliers. He's in this movie. And music by Edward Belos, I think that's how you say his name. And I think Ed French did the gore effects for this movie, which of course Ed French went on to do the gore effects for Creepshow 2, among many other movies. But, I mean, what more can I say about Sleepaway Camp that hasn't been said before? When people always mention about Sleepaway Camp, they always talk about the big twist ending that happens at the very end, which is this shot here. You don't see like the twist or anything like that, but the reaction of these two people here. That's like kind of like an ending shot of what what the ending is. And I'm not going to spoil what the ending is, even though a lot of horror fans probably know what I'm talking about. But for anybody who's a newcomer and who hasn't seen Sleepaway Camp before, and you don't want to be spoiled, don't worry, I'm not going to say what the ending is. But such a great ending, such a great twist ending. I remember when I first saw it, I was completely speechless. I couldn't believe it. And I think that's what makes this film work. I mean, that was like the cherry on top of the sundae, was that ending. Because everything else was so good, and that ending just like topped it all off. You have a really great cast of people in here: Mike Kellen, Paul D'Angelo, Jonathan Tiersten, of course, Felissa Rose, Christopher Collette. I think it's directed very well by Robert Hiltzik, who I know went on to do Return to Sleepaway Camp many years later. He didn't do the sequels, but Felissa Rose does a great job as Angela. I really like Christopher Collette. I really like Jonathan Tiersten. I mean, this is just a fantastic slasher film. A lot of really great, good deaths. Like there's this one guy, the character of Billy, who gets stung by all these bees, and then when they find his body, there's like bees all over his face and things like that. Just bees are just covering up his body. You also have one where a girl gets slit in the throat from the back. Then you have one guy get shot through the neck with an arrow. One guy drowns in a lake. So it's like one of those kind of like mystery movies where you kind of have to figure out who it is and things like that. But I mean, I think it's really hard for me to go into much more in depth about Sleepaway Camp because it's one of those 80s slasher films that just stands out a lot when it comes to like 80s slasher movies. I mean, I also really enjoy the sequels as well, but the first one is the best one. And on top of that too, I gotta admit, like the character of Billy when he gets killed by all the bees and all that stuff, and what's funny enough, if you read up the information about how they did that scene, what they did was they took a dummy, they made a dummy, and they spread honey all over the dummy, like all over it, and then that attracted all these bees and things like that. So that's why the bees all look like that, because they spread honey all over this dummy to make it look like Billy was stung by all these bees, which I thought was a pretty interesting piece of information I read up on. And on top of that too, that just got to me really good because I'm not really much of a bee guy. I don't really like bugs, so it kind of give me the heebie-jeebies a little bit. Got to give the movie the credit for that. But what more can you say about Sleepaway Camp that hasn't been said before? It's a classic slasher movie. So that is pretty much it for my review for Sleepaway Camp. Thanks a lot for watching, and I will see you guys next time. You guys take care.